welcome to the Sci-AI podcast. This is episode number 15. Today, my guest is an award-winning tech and business leader, Jonathan Reichental. It is an amazing honor to have him on the podcast. He is an author of the best-selling book, The Smart Cities. He is a keynote speaker and has done various speaking engagements all over the world. In 2013, he was recognized as one of the 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers by the government in America. In 2016, he was named a top influential CIO in the United States, and 2017 as the top 100 CIOs in the world. Reichental is a recognized global thought leader on a number of emerging trends, including urban innovation, smart cities, sustainability, blockchain technology, data governance, the fourth industrial revolution, and digital transformation. He's also a LinkedIn course instructor. I've got really great value from all the courses that he taught on LinkedIn. They're just amazing. Thank you, John, for joining the podcast.
Well, thanks, Vivek. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So let's get on and let's get started with some of the cool questions that we have for you. Taking a cue from your LinkedIn course, I want to ask you this. Is Bill Gates, Elon Musk's view about AI, that it can be dangerous for us in the future, really something that we should be worried about? For example, the autonomous weapons capability, controlling electricity grids, becoming more and more sentient in the future. Should we be worried about the AI?
It's an important question, and there are lots of things for us to be worried about regarding the future. I'm particularly concerned about the environment. You know, I'm worried about the climate emergency. So these are some things that are nearer term, and there's things we can do about it. You know, there's things we can do to recycle, to eat less meat, to be more, to make better decisions in our purchasing decisions and things like that. Artificial intelligence is emerging rapidly as a big part of our human future. And well, the thesis is from leading thinkers who think about this every single day, probably more than I do. It is that there's three paths for AI. One is that it continues to be sort of benign, positive technology that supports us in all different ways. And it does that today. It helps us find directions. It filters our email so that we don't get as much spam. You know, it helps us recognize our voice when we want to talk to our smart assistant at home. We see AI in many ways manifest that way. Right. Another pathway is that we continue to push AI unconstrained, unregulated, and it does displace hundreds of millions of workers. It does start to create a range of challenges, from baking bias into decisions that are augmented by technology, to being something that reduces the value of humans in the work that we do and the contributions we can make. And a third path potentially is that both of these scenarios can coexist. That we get the benefit of AI, but we also are open-minded and understand that, like with a lot of technology, we have to be concerned about challenges. We have all the benefits of IT today, but we live with hacking, right? And we live with real struggles relative to cybersecurity. Now, if you're Elon Musk and Bill Gates, they have real concerns about the second path, that in an unregulated, unmanaged future, AI is a real threat to human value, and perhaps in an extreme situation, AI is making choices that we wouldn't make, and those choices could be dangerous. So what we're faced with is kind of a series of small little forks in the road, and we're kind of making those as we go here. And the question is, are we thinking big picture? Are we thinking about the big ways in which we manage the emergence of AI as it progresses in the next few years, or are we just making very tactical choices, every few days? I think to get to the core of your question, I think there are reasons to be concerned, sure. Not something to lose sleep over in the next few weeks or months, for sure. There are other things worth worrying about. Right. But if we are smart and we make a series of important big decisions, working, collectively across society, with government, with private sector, with academia, and other NGOs, I think we can proceed and get all the value of AI while trying to limit some of the extreme. Now, the future is always unpredictable, so perhaps we'll be surprised, and the moment at which AI leaps from being sort of an enhancement or augmentation to humanity and leaps to becoming a sentient, independent thinking set of outcomes. That could be sudden and surprising. So I hope that gives you sort of a balanced answer about how I think about the problem.
That's fantastic. It's very balanced, and you did not take any one side, and you did not say that it can be a threat, but showed us a very, very realistic pathway to how it will evolve. Thank you. Yes. So will OpenAI be able to solve the problem of AI regulations so that AI is really regulated and helps humanity stay secured and alive? Because take an example of China, where perhaps OpenAI is not being recommended or not being followed, like perhaps in the United States, Europe, or Australia or Asia, but China maybe not. So how would OpenAI make sure that it is regulated and all of the world follows it? Because if somebody doesn't, then it can be a problem as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've struggled as a planet to have any type of unified approach to a lot of things. The emergence of the United Nations after World War II is really an earnest attempt to have a platform where we could agree on a whole range of issues, particularly around national security and world peace. And we have things like the International Standards Organization, organizations like IEEE. So, we do try to adopt standards and have a consensus on moving forward in a number of areas, but we generally aren't that good. There are massive cultural differences. There are competing reasons why in the sort of macro geopolitical environment, there isn't alignment, and some nations may have strategic reasons for pursuing a path that others don't agree with, and that's the nature of humanity. It's the nature of the world as we see it in 2021. Again, I'm kind of like a bit of an optimist. We've come a long way, and the world today is more unified in many ways and more at peace in many ways. Although watching the media, you might not think that, right? So the question then becomes, how should we approach something like artificial intelligence, perhaps on a global basis? How should we think about the challenges? How should we manage the risks? You cite one organization, OpenAI. They're based out of San Francisco here. And in its early days, yes, it was very much a kind of a non-for-profit organization focused on ensuring that AI was used for the betterment of humans. And they would do everything in their power to create models for good AI ethics, good best practices for the management of algorithms and beyond. Now, recently, OpenAI has become a little bit more commercial. Microsoft invested heavily and is adopting many of its solutions in the Microsoft suite of products. So it is in a period of transition. That being said, it still has a very strong mission and has its charter, which talks about how all of us should consider and think about the positive use of AI and the management of AI. So I think researching OpenAI as I did for my LinkedIn learning course, GPT-3 course in particular, and other research that I've done in AI, there is the need for organizations to create positive models and best practices for others to follow. And OpenAI really believes in that philosophy. They think if they can bring in big thinkers, as they have, it started with Elon Musk and some others, although he's not as involved anymore because it's a conflict of interest since he's working on AI at Tesla. Yes, right. And so, but when you have big thinkers who have some clout, and power on the world stage, people listen to them. They have a chance to create models, positive models for how we should be thinking about these things. So I wouldn't overthink or overextend the impact of something like the OpenAI Charter. I would be modest about what it can achieve, but it's certainly a strong voice in this topic about ethical management of AI as we go forward.
Oh, that's good. Absolutely, because it's still early days, and OpenAI could be just one of the mediums to control or regulate AI, and we'll see how it evolves. Great answer. Thank you. Will the OpenAI Charter become the regulatory body for the AI and AGI community globally? Or do you think that governments around the world and scientists and scholars should form something like this? Why I say this is it's very easy for entrepreneurs like Elon Musk's and others, and a group of people who think alike to form an organization like this and make a charter. But it may not involve some of the issues, like you said, the strategic geopolitical views about different regions of the world that should also go in there, understanding which region brings what, and what are the benefits of AI in that region or not. So, yeah, so what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I don't think OpenAI as an organization has an aspiration to be any type of regulatory body. I like where you're coming from, and I think the OpenAI Charter, which anyone can access with a quick online search, is worth reading. It's quite brief, but it's meaningful, and it talks about just the considerations. I can tell you a couple here. Yes. Their belief is that artificial intelligence, and by the way, specifically, they call out artificial general intelligence, which is sort of the midterm to future term outlook for AI becoming a lot smarter, just say. Right. And so they believe that, a responsibility for anyone who develops in the realm of AI and AGI, it should be for the benefit of humanity. That safety, the safety of the technology should be made a priority and should be baked into all of the research efforts and development efforts. And that overall, as we work together as a humanity, given the sizable potential impact of AGI on humanity, that we should work together, that to the degree possible, we're collaborative. Now, that's a little counter to our capitalist markets, right? Right. Our economic models actually incentivize us to not cooperate, and in fact, to hyper compete in the 21st century. So the notion from OpenAI that, as we develop out AGI, that we work closely together and we share findings and best practices and even share technologies, has a beautiful sentiment. And I think it's a call to action. It's a call to think differently. And it may be time. This may be the time when, this is an area where we can all benefit and competition actually is detrimental. But I'm not holding my breath necessarily on this idea. I think it's aspirational, and perhaps there will be some sort of consortium of public-private partnerships that will help to regulate. Ultimately, regulation is going to come down to government involvement. Some people don't like that, but right. Government is involved in our healthcare system for good reason, and making sure that our planes are safe to fly, and our water is safe to drink. So the government as a regulator is a big part of our life today, and I think we for the most part, actually enjoy those benefits. So I think what we're going to see, and we're already seeing very much evidence of this, is that national governments in particular, and public and private entities within those countries are joining forces to come up with to script and champion appropriate legislation, or even at the early stages necessary strategy. Right. You even see, though, AI regulation and policy being driven at a city level and also at a state level in many countries. So it does feel like, to your question, this will get regulated, and I think that is an important part. The degree to which we regulate it or don't is a continuum of possibilities, but it is early days, and we certainly have to see how it rolls out. And again, this comes back to maybe my answer to my first question. We have some very important decisions ahead as societies. These can't be thought of tactically, things that will impact the next 2-3 years, but how does it impact us over the next few decades and then over the next century? I think that's a bigger and more appropriate lens through which we need to look at this problem.
Yeah. So you already talked about GPT-3. Let me ask you this question on GPT-3. Is GPT-3 the beginning of the real AGI, or the artificial general intelligence? Why I say this is how we are actually adding emotions to the algorithms is what really is interesting, is going to be interesting. And if GPT-3 can sort of, command all that already, then, is that really close to the AGI?
It depends who you ask, actually. There's a variety of opinions. Look, if you ask the current CEO of OpenAI, who are responsible for this new generation of artificial intelligence called GPT-3, he says that it's our expectations are exaggerated, that perhaps we believe it's more capable than it is. There's an important concept within the AI world. We call it the Turing test, after one of the pioneers of computation, Alan Turing. And the Turing test, a lot of people know it. Maybe your listeners are smarter than most listeners. It's if you are talking to another entity that you can't see. So in another room, there could be a computer or a person, and you have a dialogue with that entity. If you can't tell whether it's a computer or a human, we have said to have passed the Turing test, right? So it could be that when you actually type a message on your side of the wall, let's say, and you say, how do you feel today? And the response is such that you look at it and you say, I can't tell if that's a computer or a person. We've said to have passed the Turing test. We haven't got there yet. We don't have a repeatable positive Turing experience, although the expectation is we will get there. And so the question then is asked, if you as a human think you're talking to another sentient thing, does it matter if it's a human or a robot or a computer, right? We get into now a space of thinking about this question that is more philosophical than it is computer science or engineering. What is consciousness? What is sentience? And so to broaden a little bit, you ask about emotion. Well, we assume that emotion is a component of sentience, a consciousness, an awareness of itself. And again, if the computer demonstrates it in a convincing way, are we as humans in a position to say, well, that's not sentience, that's not consciousness, it's artificial, it's fake, it doesn't exist in the same way that the human experience does. I think what we need to do is fully understand what it means to be conscious and sentient as a human being, and I don't think we yet have determined what that is and how, and really come to really strong conclusions. That's an area of continued remarkable research and science. And so getting back to the question of GPT-3, so what you have is a fantastic new, very complex algorithm, I guess, or set of algorithms that takes the content of the world, a lot of the online content, and shapes it in a way that appears to pass the Turing test. So I might have an interaction with a GPT-3, a dialogue or chatbot, and I might say something like, I need to book a ticket to fly from San Francisco to Dallas. And the GPT-3 comes back and says, well, it's good to talk to you today. I have some options for you. I'd like to suggest these airlines at these times. Do any of these look good to you? And you might say, wow, it's so fantastically human the way it's doing this. But that's the power of this. It gives the impression that it is thinking, it understands logic, but it is, and I don't mean to be unfair to people who study this and work in AI. It is kind of a fancy trick. It is a little bit of sort of a magician who makes something appear to be something it's not. And AI today is very much kind of a magic trick, right? There isn't a thinking, pondering, conscious computer behind the screen. It is using mathematics and data to be able to give what appear to be remarkably good answers. And so I think the conclusion of my answer to this question is GPT-3 is not sentience. It is not emotional AI. It is a fantastic, powerful, impressive solution in so many ways. It mimics human text and human interaction in a remarkable way, better than we've seen in the past. But it is by no means anything close to AGI or a conscious computer.
But is it even the beginning of AGI? I mean, what I mean is that I've done a few podcasts wherein the AGI experts talk about cognitive architectures to be needed in order to build AGI. So does GPT-3, resemble something of that? Or do you think, it's still quite far from AGI?
Well, take the last part of your question first. I do think we are still far away from viable AGI. I don't think that's imminent. Timelines are always interesting in tech. People ask me all the time, for example, when will most cars drive themselves? When will we make the transition from, driving cars ourselves to almost all self-driving cars? It's a hard question to answer. I know it's coming, but it's hard to say, is it in the next 10 years or next 30 years, And look, the history of the last 20 to 30 years is things happen faster than we think, and so we probably should err on things being a little bit faster than we anticipate, that we might get surprised. What is remarkable about any research and any developments in the AI space is every wave of new innovation accelerates the previous waves. So you really have the scientific theory and practice. Past knowledge, you build on it, improves the knowledge, you move a topic forward. But because we're talking about algorithms here, and we're baking in more storage, more data, more high-performing processors, it's always getting not just a little bit better, but rapidly better. So GPT-3 feels like one of those very important stepping stones on our journey towards AGI. Again, we don't know if it's one of the first stepping stones or one of the middle ones, or are we towards the time when the switch is about to be flipped and things get really strange. There's a very high degree of uncertainty there. What makes GPT-3 distinctive and successful is just the sheer scale of data that it taps in to make its magic happen, right? It's the exceptional scale of the ways in which it can consume and process on a level, a multitude, many times greater than any previous AI solution that uses data. And of course, we're calling it GPT-3. It's like the third version. You can imagine that GPT-3.4 and GPT-3.5, each of them will be vastly superior than previous versions, and use even more data and get even give the appearance of greater smartness. I'll be the first to admit that I can't go very much deeper than that, given a lighter background than maybe some of your other guests in the computer science behind this. Suffice to say that I don't know that I can quantitatively say GPT-3 gets us closer to sentience or aware or cognitive intelligence in a computing system. All I can say is it's improving the game. It's moving the needle forward. It's giving the appearance and presenting solutions in a completely new and remarkable way that one has to conclude these are steps in a direction that is getting us closer to something eventually that will look like AGI.
Right. Great answer. No, thank you so much. Okay, so what is blockchain technology? How does it help to create all kinds of data and not just cryptocurrency data? How is it better than any other kind of, let's say, legacy applications to secure and store data? Why I asked you is that in one of your LinkedIn courses, you covered it and really enjoyed that. But I really want just a little bit of more, explanation on that.
Well, we took a sudden corner from AI to blockchain,
Yeah.
which is great. Yeah, why not? Let's have fun with it. I talk about it. Another technology which has captured our imaginations. Right? We didn't even hear the term blockchain, 11 years ago, and today blockchain and cryptocurrencies roll off the tongue, very easily. So what happened? What is it? I'll try to give a very basic description of what it is. I think that's the first part of your question. There are many ways of describing it, and I think sometimes people who work in this space, they overcomplicate it when they give answers to people who maybe don't have the basis for understanding what they're saying. At some level, it is a way to store information about transactions, right? So just like a traditional relational database that you use, everybody uses on their computers, even though they don't realize it. We use databases to do just about everything in computing today. Blockchain can be considered a form of storing transactions. And so it's an alternative, right, to the traditional mechanisms. But the question then is, well, why do we care? Why is it different? Why would you use this blockchain technology, this way to store and move transactions between participants in a network? One of the things that it does well is, if you think about an existing or traditional database system, often the interaction with the data and the movement of data is initiated by humans, and the authority to manage the behavior of that data and the rules around that data are often human-based. Let's take an example. When somebody wants to join a network, say they join an organization and they need access to an important database, usually a human being, some administrator, says, who are you? Why should I give you access? Right. And what kind of access do you need? And it's very human mediated, right? And so even though obviously it's a computing platform, the activities are very much human in the manner in which they take place. What blockchain does is it replaces a lot of that human interaction with code, with software. So some of these sort of big decisions we can codify, we can create code that essentially quickly makes choices about what can take place. For example, whether a person is allowed to participate based on their credentials, or whether a transaction can take place based on the rules of the network. And what you have is in a blockchain based network is computing, and the computational work is distributed among a lot of the participants on the network. So it creates a flatter hierarchy that ensures a more fair system, and one that doesn't rely on human bias or human availability or human error, but largely almost exclusively relies on code to make things happen. So this is really valuable when it comes to things like a new form of money. So,
Right.
The problem that a blockchain solved for digital money back in 2008 in the original Satoshi Nakamoto paper is how do you account for double spending? So if you have digital money, if I copy it, make a copy of it before I pay you. If I pay Vivek, $5, and then I just copy that $5 and pay somebody the same $5, well, you don't have an economic system. It doesn't work, right? The minute I pay you, I have to be without the $5, and you have the gain of the $5. How do you solve that, double spending problem? This is the core to what the magic was in the that created Bitcoin. And this is done again through this sort of unique architecture. You have a network that manages these transactions, right? In this case, it's a monetary transaction, and the system through code and the sort of consensus of the participating computers ensures that transactions are valid and they can't be repeated. And once I send you my $5, I can't do it again. That's what blockchain does well. So then to get to the last part of your question.
Yeah.
Well, beyond cryptocurrency, what is blockchain providing?
Right.
So the sky's the limit is the answer to that. Every transaction that takes place today that perhaps is in some way burdened because of human engagement. Let's think about a mortgage, right? the joy of everybody's life. How do you go through the mortgage process to buy a house, right? I think everyone would agree it's painful, right? There's a lot of paperwork, and there's a lot of people. There's lawyers, there's realtors, there's notaries, there's financial institutions. Think about all the participants. And, you've got to sign a lot of documents, and mistakes happen, and it's bureaucratic, and it takes a long time. Okay. There you have a traditional human process that, some of it is clearly automated. We use computer systems, but still there's a lot of steps, a lot of participation. Now, if we go back to some of the principles of blockchain that I shared earlier, this idea that transactions are stored in a database and rules are guided by software, not by people, you could imagine that in the course of initiating a mortgage process, a blockchain network, a blockchain system might be better at more efficiently processing some basic requirements, right? By talking to other systems, by fulfilling the specificity of certain rules, and just, not waiting for a human being to press, approve, or to wait for humans to be signatories. The confidence we get in the blockchain network that we would typically have got in a human being is the fact that the software and the consensus of the participants ensure the integrity of every transaction. And so what you find then is in systems that are now trying to, for example, replace mortgages with blockchain technology, it moves faster, it's lower cost, and there's less errors. Now, of course, in the course of doing that, it displaces people. We're not happy about that. But that there is a price to progress, and hopefully people move on to do other types of work. A basic at the core, what I'm trying to say is, in a whole range of human-mediated transactions, blockchain has the ability to eliminate those intermediaries. And so we can do away with a lot of overhead and a lot of cost. And think about all the things in life that you deal with where a human being has to intervene. Imagine if you didn't have that, right? I think in a lot of cases, you'd actually be very supportive. And that's where we're seeing blockchain used in the healthcare world and supply chain. It's very big. And of course, financial transactions, in cities, in autonomous vehicles and in the energy sector. So the role of blockchain has broad applicability and value across the economy.
Fantastic. Then on top of it, is it also more safer than a traditional database system? Because the transactions here are all non-human, and then you will have no control once it's going on through algorithms to algorithms. So is it more safer as well?
I like the question, and it's an important question. I can't give a quick answer to it.
Sure.
People would love me to say, "Oh yeah, it's safer."
Please go ahead. Yeah, take it.
That would be the easier answer, right? It would be more simple to say that. Nothing is that simple, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. The way you ask the question is really important. With less human intervention, with higher integrity in the way in which transactions are authenticated and processed, the assumption is, yes, in fact, blockchain has the potential to be more secure, to give us a higher degree of confidence in anything that may take place on it. And the evidence is, for the most part, it actually does improve the integrity of transactions. It does protect against some more traditional fraud and even, hacking attempts by cyber criminals. The evidence is that it does a better job of that just by its pure, design, the way it's architected. However, on the flip side, there are notable hacks, and unfortunately, cryptocurrencies and other blockchains have been subject to vulnerabilities. Now, part of this is because the technology is still evolving. It's still, technology that's emerging, and it's being innovated, and it's rapidly happening. There's a lot of people in the ecosystem, but it's early. I mean, the first time we see blockchain in its current manifestation is in 2009, right? A year after the Satoshi paper. So that means we're in 2021. We're like 12 years since this technology emerged, and we have a lot to be really impressed by. The degree to which Bitcoin and Ethereum and even things like Ripple and other blockchain solutions have emerged and have been, in some respects, game-changing. But we're still really very much at the beginning, and we are seeing still a high degree of risks because of the technology. I think in the sort of medium to longer term, there is some evidence that data managed exclusively on a series of blockchains has the potential to be a lot more secure. And so, I'm optimistic, and I think we're heading in that direction. It's already demonstrating the possibility of that in just its reliability today. But the current weaknesses give me some caution. I think the whole topic of cybersecurity in general is an area of considerable innovation, significant risk today. Our systems are, because of the sheer number of new systems and new entry points, presents greater and greater risk to each of us and our organizations and to society. As fast as we innovate, the cyber criminals also are pretty smart and doing their thing. So it is sort of a constant race. Looking further ahead, I think we need to be thinking completely differently about how we secure data. I'm particularly intrigued by quantum cryptography, for example, and the quantum internet. The next generation of computing stack that, through pure physics, is going to make it much more difficult and in some cases impossible to hack. So we're going to need a lot of different tools in our toolkit to secure the future.
Right. Fantastic. That's a great ending to the answer, because you provided a great solution as well, for the future. So, yeah, great. Okay, let's come back to AI now. So is LIDAR currently the best mechanism to strengthen the capability of an autonomous vehicle? What other aspects, other than perhaps a great algorithm that encapsulates possibly all scenarios that can happen on the road, when a person is driving, or when a autonomous vehicle is driving, covers it? So what do you think about it?
I like it. I'm going to be the first always to put up my hand and say, this is not my strength area. I'm not going to try to be a automotive engineer here for a moment. I am very much a supporter, and I would say a lightweight researcher in autonomous vehicles, mainly from the perspective of what it means to our cities, because that's one of my passion areas, is the future of cities. I am watching, as all of us are, the rapid development of autonomous vehicles, and as we climb through the levels of autonomous driving from 0 through 5, it's every day it's getting a little more interesting. Today we have level 5 autonomous vehicles, which basically means they have no steering wheel or any human instruments within for human control. It's completely controlled by the computer and the AI, and we'll see this rolled out very quickly. In fact, we've passed the point at which this is now a question. Will there be autonomous vehicles? And now the questions are, how do AI based vehicles make the right choices, and what does it mean to car ownership, and our role as drivers in the ecosystem of roads of autonomous vehicles. So we're entering a remarkable new period. Some people have said that autonomous vehicles will be the most important technology of the first 50 years of the 21st century, and there's a lot of support for that. Right. We're not talking about just cars that drive themselves. We're talking about how we can design our cities differently, what it means to get from point A to point B, what it means to things like car ownership, which probably is going away. It begs questions around the role of insurance and how insurance will work and where responsibility lies. And then there's the whole ecosystem of solutions. What's the apps economy for self-driving cars? When the smartphone came out, and the iPhone came out about 13, 14 years ago, none of us really anticipated the millions and millions of businesses that would be created as part of the apps ecosystem. And we can anticipate something maybe similar when autonomous vehicles arrive. So a very big deal, and it's happening before our eyes. And by the way, if you haven't had the chance to ride in a self-driving car, I find a way to do it. It's quite amazing. Find a friend who has maybe a Tesla, or find a research lab or one of the car company labs and try it. Perhaps ride in some of the other cars too. Getting back to your question again, I'm not going to try to answer the engineering question.
Sure.
A LIDAR certainly as a mechanism for mapping out the surrounding environment and being able to detect objects and do the steering and all the cool stuff it does, continues to make leaps. Part of it, of course, is remarkable processing speeds, better algorithms, faster telecommunications and telemetry. That was all necessary to make all this happen. We're going to have really good what's called V2V or vehicle-to-vehicle communications, and that's being developed. We're going to have really good V2I, which is a vehicle-to-infrastructure technology, so that literally buildings will talk to cars and cars will talk to buildings and other objects, so that decisions can be made. It'll all happen very, very fast, but what's the best decision for avoiding an accident, whether it involves other physical objects or people, which could happen, right? So I'm pretty bullish on our autonomous vehicle. Our autonomous future. I do think that this is going to happen fast and will be rather unexpected in not only the benefits, and I think there will be a lot of benefits, but also in the challenges we'll face as we migrate from a human driving world to a world in which computers drive for us.
Fantastic. Just great answer. And, the government's also supporting it. I've heard Norway, if you own a Tesla car, you will have a free parking. There are so many charging spots where you can freely charge it and all. And I think the American government also is doing it with Tesla, providing them much more tax benefits when they just installed it at Austin. They moved, I think, from California to Austin recently. So yeah, I think that's where the push is. So really great answer. Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Right. Great. You're also a great instructor, with your LinkedIn courses and the books that you write and all. So let me ask you a question connected to that. What are some of the career and business opportunities do you think for the next generation coming up when it comes to AI? You briefly touched that, autonomous vehicles will provide many things when the first iPhones came, it brought a lot of other industries along with it. What kind of industries do you think AI will bring in, considering healthcare, pharma, and sort of other fields?
Yeah. We're concerned about the future of work. We are appropriately concerned. A lot of repetitive work is already getting replaced with machines and AI. Even the sort of right-brained creative work is starting to get replaced. I've played with some music composing software that the AI writes the music, and it's good. It's really good.
Wow.
And we're seeing now GPT3, for example, write stories and articles that are pretty convincing. They were done by humans. A lot of automation now in the legal business. We thought the legal world would be the sort of perhaps one of the last to be automated. And in fact, it's moving quite fast. So there is a lot of disruption that the emergence of AI is going to create in the world of work. And, if you're a real pessimist, you look out and you say, well, we're projected to displace about 800 million workers by 2030, which is about 20% of the world's workforce. That's, probably the worst case scenario. I don't think we quite get there, but we do see some displacement, and this is going to cause definitely a disruption in the force. But it's going to create some unpleasant scenarios in which we, as organizations and as governments, we need to face head on. But that said, there's a decent but here, which is it possible that the new technologies and new behaviors and new global needs actually generate a lot more work and different skills? And the answer is yes. The only thing we don't know is how much. Is it if 800 million jobs are going to be displaced, do we replace it with 800 million new jobs, or 500 or 300 million? And in which case we're still left with this extreme problem of massive unemployment. Or what do we do with hundreds of millions of people? We have to face that question. New work will emerge. We already see big demands. We already see huge demands, for example, in the area of cybersecurity. Here in the US alone, we have many more openings than we have talent for. And that applies also to areas like data science.
Data science, yeah.
We need a lot more data scientists graduating from colleges and universities and programs. We have a lot of need for project managers and business analysts and other high value work like that. We will have openings for millions of people, but these are high skill jobs. And where the impact will be felt in the near term is going to be with, again, lower skilled work. Although there still will be opportunity there, maybe less. Where there will be demand and probably a shortfall for the foreseeable future is in high skilled work. And the specificity, the really specific, high value jobs within artificial intelligence will struggle to get good talent. And so we need more people going into university and professional programs to be able to graduate in a whole range of AI related fields, everything from, of course, software engineering to data science to visualization to electronics engineering. There's a hardware component, there's a software component, there's a data component, there's a network component. All these will need a lot of talent. So I'm really optimistic about the massive demands for very specialized, high value jobs in the years ahead. And so if you are interested in this area and want to know what opportunities there are, well, part of it is going to be, where's your passion? What are you excited about? Do you like the more hardware side of things, building things, the sort of more the traditional engineering role? Do you like the software? In which case, backgrounds in programming and mathematics will be valuable. And then you got, of course, the data science and the networking, which is also on the engineering end. We're going to need people that are really good at storytelling. We're going to need people who are great at communications and documentation. We're going to need people who are great philosophers, and ethicists. We're going to need ethicists, and we're going to need physicists, and chemical engineers, and more people who studying the biology and all the natural sciences, because you can take all these core science related areas, but we also need to think about them in the context of industries. So we're going to need people who are good in all these areas, that are good in these areas, that are also good and have a passion for agriculture and for entertainment and for financial services and supply chain and automotive, so find what your passion is in these areas. You'll find a lot of roles, and then decide what industry is really appealing to you. You can be a generalist, sure, and there's a good argument. But there's also a lot of appetite, for example, AI people who have a background in automotive or have studied, cars and transportation. And the same applies throughout, the multitude of industries we have in each of our economies. So I'm very excited about the possibilities here. You're going to need a good education. Make sure that you're studying up on your math. And don't forget to don't ignore your reading, writing, and verbal communication skills. No matter how technical you are, these will be even more essential in the 21st century.
Fantastic. Just great answer. And the kind of, job options and the career options that you've referred was just mind blowing. Can I also add something to it here? Because I've read and heard that, like you said, for the low skilled jobs, I don't think that, all hell's gonna break loose because the robots or the machines or the AI is here. The reason being, for the low skilled jobs, either they are going to get replaced by other kind of manufacturing, or there will be UBI as well, which is the governments are trying to create a basic income for all their country people, which is kind of securing that people who cannot work because they lose their jobs, or so they're still experimenting on that, like Finland has, and I think America also thought about it, and the rest of the world. So yeah, I'm a very optimistic person, and I believe that nothing's really bad gonna happen.
Well, I like your optimism. We have to have optimists. I'm an optimist too.
Right. Right.
On the point of UBI,
Yeah.
I'm not as convinced.
Uh-huh.
I have studied it. I have been fascinated by, the presidential candidate who ran on that here in our last election. The first time I really got to know UBI was through the work of Andrew Yang, and he basically campaigned on UBI as a major agenda for being president. And he's really smart, and he makes fantastic arguments. And I've seen the experiments that have been done. I'm not convinced. I look. I'm a person who's very open-minded. I'll always change my mind based on the data and evidence, and I want to see more of it. And of course, we're speculating, and we haven't done it at large scale, so there's a lot we don't know. But what I've been presented with, I don't think it economically is sustainable. And there are other economic, what do you call it? Economic behaviors, economic motivations that, yeah. The term I was looking for was behavioral economics, that sometimes surprise us in how people will behave relative to the economy. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw my 2 cents in there. Maybe causes a little bit of controversy, but there you go. That's what I think.
No, but who cares? I mean, that was a great point as well. So thank you. Yes. Let me give you a sort of trick question. So recently I've seen somewhere meme circulating on LinkedIn or maybe somewhere else where a great question was asked. What will happen if there is a huge traffic jam and we are living in the era of self-driving cars and trucks and everything is self-driving and electric cars? Let's say if their batteries are all out because of a traffic jam, what will happen next? And what if it happens so frequently? Won't the economies collapse because the trade will collapse? I'm still an optimist, but what a great question.
It's an important thought experiment, right? We need to think through these things. Right. I mean, I could argue what would happen if the internet was down for 2 days. What would happen to the world? If there was a complete and utter outage of the internet, we'd be in trouble. What would happen if the plumbing systems in major cities shut down? We'd have problems really, really fast. These extreme sort of widespread events, they're worth sort of gaming a little bit in a theoretical way, so we can look at contingency. But they seldom happen at sort of scale. Another interesting way to think about this is when we study plane crashes, and it's fantastic how we don't have many plane crashes today at all. When we study the history of plane crashes, you might think, well, one part broke, so the plane crashed. It turns out no, it's a series of complicated things that happen, and cumulatively they cause an aircraft accident. So they are rare, and we can't plan for the multitude of sophistication of a problem like that. We can respond, and we can learn, and we can improve. This idea that we would have a complete and utter breakdown of a vast volume of electric powered cars doesn't seem plausible to me. I think the question in itself, the basis for it is a fascinating thought experiment, but not a practical question really. So a couple of things that occurred to me. Firstly, you assume there'll be traffic jams. Perhaps in a highly optimized autonomous world, right. Where people work from home and not as many people are on the roads. The notion of intense traffic jams will be questioned and challenged, and they could become rather rare. You're going to have the occasional car that will break down, sure, but we'll have drones and autonomous vehicles that will be cruising the highways. So we'll have contingencies. There'll be the AAA of self-driving vehicles in the future. Right. But here's something that I might throw out just to be provocative. What I would encourage your listeners or viewers to do is check out a car company called Lightyear One. Lightyear One. And what Lightyear One is, it's a Dutch company, and they produce a car that the roof of the car is made up of solar panels, and the car does not need batteries or charging. Well, it does have batteries for when it's dark, of course, but it's
Sure.
mainly charged via the sun, so it doesn't have to be plugged in. So anytime there's any type of light, the car is charging. So it effectively doesn't need any charging stations. Is it possible that we're thinking too small when we think about electric cars? That in fact, our cars will be powered by the sun, or even there's been some experimentation on friction as cars drive on roads. They actually generate power, and so those are some of the ways I think about this answer. I don't think it's something we should be concerned about, and to the degree that some element of the question would be a concern, I think we'll have more than enough contingencies for it.
Right. Fantastic. Great answer. Yes, the question on smart cities, which I'm a really huge fan of, and wanted to ask you this. What are smart cities, and how do cities of the future will look like? So it's a long question. Please bear with me. Which countries will have smart cities than others? Do you see that Europe, Americas will have more smarter cities, or will the new developing economies like India and China will dominate this segment? Please share how technology is enabling these smart cities to be developed more rapidly.
Yeah. Well, we are an urban planet. More humans live in cities than anywhere else. About 2 to 3 million people move into cities every week. We're building the equivalent of Manhattan every single month, and we'll do that for the next 40 years. By the middle of the century, 70% of all humans will live in cities. Our future belongs to cities. The future of humanity is an urban species. Tim O'Reilly, who I used to work with at O'Reilly Media, sometimes called the Oracle of Silicon Valley, he says that improving our cities will be the grand project of the 21st century. And I think he's probably right. So how do we ensure that more people have access to clean water, that we have more clean energy, clean and abundant energy, that there's more inclusion, that more people have opportunity, that the air is clean, and we have a more fair society? How do we go about achieving these things? As our cities take on greater importance and become more central to the human experience, we can't use 20th century solutions for these 21st century problems. So we have to change the game. We have to think differently. We have to apply new ideas and new technologies. And that's really what we mean at the heart of smarter and more sustainable communities, is thinking differently and applying technology in completely new ways, having an innovation mindset. And so many communities around the world, from Dubai to Delhi to Melbourne to New York City, Miami, Moscow, and Helsinki and beyond, they think deeply about this, and they implement solutions that are connecting more and more people to their digital infrastructure, creating more services that are digital in nature, deploying sensors so we can detect the quality of air, using technology to reduce congestion, traffic congestion, and on and on. The list actually of things we're doing, is in the tens of thousands of different ideas. Digitalization is a core part of that, moving the analog services of cities to digital platforms. I think you and I and anyone else can have empathy for the experiences we've had where we had to fill out some paperwork, we had to go to a government building, we had to talk to people. It's all very bureaucratic and often inefficient and costs money. And we can do that better. We can do a lot more self-service. So smart cities are all about building better cities with a higher quality of life for more people. And it's going to depend. What we do in each city depends on each city. Depends on culture, depends on available financing, depends on the topography of the community and so many other things. Leadership is obviously really key to making any type of positive change. Around the world, you have definitely some big outliers. Singapore, Helsinki, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. You see a few cities here in the U.S., even San Francisco. Miami is starting to emerge as a smart city powerhouse. Dublin in Ireland. There are a few hundred cities now that are showing how things can be done differently. They are making their smarter and more sustainable activities a core part of their city strategy. We're seeing results. We're seeing economic development. We're seeing a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions through our sustainability initiatives that are driven by our smart city strategies. We're seeing more access to education, more access to the internet and services. So there's a lot of metrics that we have to prove that this is working and it's the right path. It's not about surveillance. It's not about intrusion on privacy. A lot of people make this connection. They think, hey, smart cities, all that means is less privacy and more surveillance. That's not what I believe. And big thinkers and visionary leaders in our cities don't want that either. For the most part, right? There are some outliers and some cultural outliers. I don't think right now United States is particularly leading this. In fact, I'm based out of Silicon Valley, San Francisco here, and so I sort of see the U.S. market at up close and personal. But where I see the big changes are outside the U.S. I'm particularly impressed in the work being done in Southeast Asia. Whether it's in the Philippines, Malaysia, of course, through China, through their smart city efforts over the last decade. India has made some progress, but has definitely tripped up in itself, and the extent of the challenges in Indian cities is so great that prioritizing some of this work has certainly fallen behind, and the financing has been a challenge. But the vision for India to have a country of highly efficient, smart, and sustainable cities is very much a priority for the communities and the states and the federal government of India. And that's been my own observation, and research has demonstrated that. Where the leading smart cities emerge in the years ahead is to be seen. I'm very impressed with the work being done in the Gulf states, from the United Arab Emirates across Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Bahrain and beyond. Again, China, Southeast Asia, a variety of places in Europe. Australia has really emerged as a powerhouse for thinking differently. Melbourne always is in the top 10 of the considered to be of the smartest cities in the world. Sydney is doing their good work. Places like Brisbane, who maybe we don't necessarily think of as one of the leading cities of the world, they're doing great work as it relates to changing the game. So it's a very active, it's a growing space, worth, by the way, by 2025, about $2.4 trillion of opportunity. By the end of the decade, by 2030, smart cities will create about $20 trillion worth of new economic value. So yeah, it's a fantastic area, and this is the area that I spend a lot of my life in. This is where I really spend a lot of my energy and my time helping cities and leaders all around the world try to progress with their smart city strategy.
Fantastic. Yes. And I also have read that I think in Spain, Barcelona, they have built something like this, that if you're closer to the downtown, like in a place which is the center of the city, there is a region where you cannot just drive cars. It's not allowed anymore. So to reduce carbon emissions and to provide better, availability to the cyclists and to people who are, walking. So that's just fantastic. And the way it is planned, it never, brings any traffic jam or any problems in the city. So you're right. I mean, it's just amazing what the concept of smart cities is. But if I can play a little devil's advocate here,
Sure.
imagine you've written the great book Smart Cities. I love it. I'm still reading it, and it's amazing. But let's imagine you have a very, very pessimist reader. The trollers. Yes, that's the one. Fantastic. Yes. Imagine a troll who would not like, yes, the kids one as well. That's amazing. That's a great book as well. I will buy it for my kids too. So my point was, let's imagine a pessimist drop into the comment section in Amazon or somewhere on your book, and he would say, why smart cities? Why do we even need it? I mean, why do we go away from the agricultural towns, and why not build it then there only, all the tech that is needed, all the modernization that is needed? Why make it as a concrete jungle? Just thinking in that perspective. So how would you answer that?
Look, we shouldn't build cities at the cost of those who want to enjoy a rural lifestyle. And, millions and millions of people, in fact, today, billions of people still live in rural settings, and they should have a good quality of life. So, moving into a city is certainly a choice. Right. We're moving into cities at about, again, 2 to 3 million people per week. There hasn't been anything as successful as cities in bringing the most amount of people out of extreme poverty. Cities have succeeded in, providing the most amount of healthcare for the most amount of people, and access to education, to entertainment, to economic opportunities. Cities have been remarkably successful in being able to elevate the human experience for more and more people. People are making that choice. If you don't care for cities, certainly you don't need to live in one. No one forces you, I think, in most places to live in a city. So, during COVID, we definitely saw some people decide to move to other areas, to rural towns and cities around the United States, for example, because we were working from home. So the need to be in a city wasn't as pressing. You didn't have to be near your job. That said, the momentum shows, that we're going to continue to urbanize. Cities are going to continue to grow. By the middle of the century, 70% of all humans will live in a city. By the end of the century, it's going to be closer to 80%, probably more. We are an urban species, and this is an urban planet, and that's just a fact. We ain't going back. The train has left the station.
That's a good one to end it. Fantastic. Okay. So my last question to you is a bit philosophical.
Sure.
And you've kind of already touched on it a little bit in some of the starting ones, but here it is. So what, in your opinion, is consciousness? How are we conscious, and why did we evolve to become an intelligent being, but not other mammals and plants? Like, has somebody actually planned it for us that we become sentient, but not others? How is it possible?
You left the most difficult, biggest question to last. I like that. Let me take different parts of this. It's a really lovely question.
Sure.
And, we're going to have different opinions and different basis for our points of view and the data on this. First of all, I'll answer the last part of the question very quickly. There is no designer. There is no master plan. We exist as humans, and all of life exists. The universe exists through a series of just purely random sets of natural causes, the basis of physics, chemistry, and biology. There is no purpose. There is no meaning. We are what we are. We've evolved through the pathway of science. So there is no, I don't believe there to be any sort of choices that were made to get here. We just saw the principles of science applied, and here we are, 13 billion years after the Big Bang, and we happen to be here right now chatting. We appear to be conscious, sentient, aware, and it's the greatest mystery and the greatest miracle of all. What science is telling us, I think, is that we still have a massive gap in our knowledge. We don't know a lot of the foundational ways to answer this question. Something as simple as what happened before the Big Bang. Hard for the human brain to process that question. Are there multiple universes? Are there multiverses? Right? Does time travel sort of in a straight line where there is past, present, and future, or are we just experiencing it that way? So there are just these remarkably complicated questions that are difficult for us to process. One way for us to think about the question of what is consciousness and is you're able to ask me the question, and I can think about the question. But for example, does a cat wonder how a television works? Well, the answer is no. The cat never. We don't think the cat ever thinks about the TV. It may not even be conscious that the TV is what it is and how it's working. And in the same way, because the brain, the capacity of that cat, never gets to think about how the television works. And so the question the context by which I would answer your question is the fact that you can ask me what consciousness is or what happened before the Big Bang, I can't process the answer, may be the equivalent of the cat not being able to think about or understand how a television will ever work, right?
That's a heavy one.
We don't we don't necessarily have the computational wherewithal in our little brains to be able to think it through. It certainly has happened, and it's certainly possible. The universe exists, consciousness exists, but I don't know that we have the capacity to be able to answer it properly. I don't know what it means to be conscious. I don't know what it means to be alive. I can't actually prove to you conclusively that this is happening right now. For example, let me just play with you and the audience for a second.
Right.
You are, so Vivek's on one side of this podcast right now asking me questions, and you're thinking about my answer and you're listening to me and you thought about the question. Maybe you're the only thing that exists. Am I just part of a simulation? Am I just part of your imagination? I can't demonstrate to you that I exist. You just take it for granted. Now, let's flip it around. Maybe I'm the only one who exists. And though you think you're thinking, you don't actually exist. You are just part of my mind, right? And so...
Fantastic. That's a real heavy one.
Something for you to chew on for a little while.
Right.
There are ideas around this. There are clever people who have written about this and researched it, and we're making discoveries every day that don't necessarily make the answer to this question easier. For example, we understand the physical world as we observe it, but as you kind of begin to look at things that are very, very small, you get to what's the quantum domain. We get into what's called quantum physics, which is the behavior of particles and photons and the and neutrons and the elements and the inside of elements. You start to see some really weird stuff happening. For example, the behavior of something changes as you observe it. We've seen things like evidence of particles that can go back in time and go forward. So time travel is possible, with certain particles, and so at some level, all of that scales up, and you get us. You start to combine all these atoms, and at the very large scale, the macro scale, you get a heart and muscle and bones and a brain, and you get the natural environment. But we are, at the end of the day, just sort of this assembly of independent atoms and even smaller particles beyond, that are within atoms. None of them are touching, and they're all independent. And yet, when they come together in the trillions and trillions, you get a thinking, moving, conscious human being. So we don't know how all that happens. We don't know how all that works. And for the most part, it's a grand, illusion. It's magical. It's a mystery. And maybe the way I can conclude the answer to this difficult question is, we have an enormous appetite for curiosity as humans. And, over the last couple of hundred years, or, even a few thousand years, we've answered a lot of the questions we've asked. What is the universe? What are planets? What is the sun? How is heat generated? What is energy? We're answering. Is it possible we'll never answer this question? Right? Is it possible we'll never actually get to the answer? I don't think humans last, a long time. Well, we'd have to get off the earth, in order to last for, millions, if not billions of years. Otherwise, the sun is going to expand and basically burn up the solar system. So there is no earth. Could it be that humans, we're gone and there's zero evidence that we ever existed? Save for a few maybe probes that we shot off into the universe, and so we never actually find out the answer. Could that be possible?
Wow, that was the biggest mind blowing one, and I think that's the reason why you're one of the best speakers in the world, because the way you end it is on the biggest note, on the most biggest one, for the audiences to think about and take it back with them. But yes, I mean, I had so much fun, John. Cannot tell you that I'm eager to read Smart Cities and learn a lot about your work. And very soon, if you have time, perhaps we can sit again and discuss some of the more topics which I just discovered that you like, about talking about universe and space travel and all that. So I would love to go with you on that.
It would be a lot of fun, and the next time we speak, I'd like to hear what you think as well. So we'll maybe discover your views on this topic as well.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yes. So this is how we end. Thank you, John. And you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please support this podcast by liking, commenting, sharing it with your friends, and also subscribing to this channel. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.